pomeriggio e grazie di essere qui con noi a questo seminario, a questa tavola rotonda con cui ho il piacere di parlare con, direi, tre donne straordinarie per quanto riguarda l'educazione finanziaria per i giovani. Sono Anna Lusardi, il direttore del Comitato per la programmazione e il coordinamento delle attività di educazione finanziaria. Sono qui a Roma durante la conferenza G20 organizzata da Magda Bianco e abbiamo cercato di utilizzare questa bella occasione anche per parlare di educazione finanziaria. Ho qui con me quindi tre speaker straordinari e adesso dovrò iniziare a parlare in inglese, ma grazie a tutti voi per essere qui con noi a questa tavola rotonda. So welcome to this webinar about the importance of financial education in school. I am delighted to speak to an extraordinary who have done so much on financial education for young people. We are all in Rome to attend the G20 Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion, and it is a pleasure and honor to be able to talk to each of you today. As you know, October is Financial Literacy Month in Italy, and this is one of the events that is part of that extensive calendar. So we only have 45 minutes, so let's get started. And I'm going to start with Flore-Anne, and such a pleasure to have you here, Flore-Anne. You know, the OECD many years ago started the program for international student assessment, which is really a visionary project to measure whether young people, 15 years old, have the knowledge and skills to participate to society. And in 2012, financial literacy was added among the set of skills and data that has been collected every 3 years. And I had the honor to participate to design of those questions. And my first question to you is really to set the stage and to tell us what have we learned from that project about financial literacy among the young.
Buonasera, grazie Anna. I will continue in English, I'm afraid. This is the extent of my Italian. Pleasure to be here. So yes, you mentioned the PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment. It is a program that is run every 3 years by the OECD to assess a variety of skills among students 15 years old. So the classic, I would say, skills that are being assessed are usually math, reading, and science. And since 2012, the OECD, and also thanks to participating countries, decided to add financial literacy. So our goal with that was really to assess what are the skills of young people when they are about to reach adulthood and be able to make financial decisions. So we already had 3 exercises. 3 times we managed to assess the level of financial literacy of students in a variety of countries, and I have the pleasure to say that both Italy and the Russian Federation participated in these 3 exercises. So let me share 4 key findings of these 3 exercises, and I have to say I picked the findings that were consistent across the 3 exercises. Obviously, the data is very rich, so in the few minutes that I have, I cannot give it all to you, but certainly just to give you a flavor. So the first finding, and as I said, we wanted to know what are the needs and gaps of the student population when it comes to making financial decisions. So what we saw is that obviously there's a diversity of situation across countries, but also within countries. And there is room for improvement in all countries. And let me be slightly more detailed. We saw that only 1 in 7 students didn't even reach our baseline survey for financial literacy. So it means that 1 in 7 students across the countries that have participated in 2018, because I'm using the 2018 data this time around, are not really able to make financial decisions at all. They are able to actually distinguish needs and wants. So they are very, very basic financial literacy skills. It is 1 in 7 across countries. It is actually the case in 1 in 5 in Italy. So it means that the population of students that are, let's say, quite weak in terms of financial literacy skills in Italy is slightly higher than the average. On the opposite side, because we want to look at students that are in difficulty, but we also want to see what is the proportion of students that are doing extremely well in financial literacy and that are really able to understand the complexity of financial products, but also to make decisions. And here we see that only 1 in 10 students achieve, on average, again, this higher level of competency, and it is only 1 in actually 20 in Italy. So showing that the percentage of students that are really high performer are relatively low in Italy. And of course, this level of proficiency means that the students are well prepared, but again, it is quite a small percentage. So this is the first finding. In a sense, yes, there are some big needs for financial literacy in all countries, and particularly in some. The second finding that I wanted to mention is that although this level of financial literacy is not as we wish to be, students already have access to financial products. And I think it is an important findings. We wanted to look at the skills, but we also wanted to check whether they already had some access to financial products. It is the case on average for more than half of the student population. They already have a bank account. And interestingly, in our last edition, we also are looking at I would say, digital experience with money. And we see that obviously a lot of students these days are already making payment online. So they already have access, they are already active financially, but they do not necessarily have the skills to deal with that. So that's the second finding. The third one is really, we want to try and see what explains or what are the contributing factors to financial literacy. And here we see that the socioeconomic backgrounds of students really matters. It really matters. Actually, students with lower level, let's say disadvantaged students that are coming from disadvantaged family tend to perform a level of proficiency lower than the others. And we only have 5 levels. So it means if you're coming from a, family that is struggling, you're probably not, advantaged in terms of knowing or acquiring financial literacy skills. So that's my third finding. And my last one, because I want to finish here, is also to look at what are the influential factors beyond the socioeconomic background. And here, importantly, we see that students that are speaking to their parents and speaking not too frequently, let's say once in a month, tend to have higher level of financial literacy. So where am I coming there? These findings really show that, students coming from disadvantaged group may not be able to acquire the appropriate skills when it comes to financial literacy because their parents may not have the skills and may not be able, to transfer the skills onto them. So I think it's a very important findings. And when I speak about disadvantaged group, I also mean, of course, students from migrants background, immigrants background also are affected with that. There are also some interesting gender findings, if I may just end on that, and I'm sure some of our panelists here will pick up on that. Across countries, there are no major gender gaps or gender divide when it comes to the level of financial literacy of students. What we see is gender differences. And I think it's really important to stress that. It's not like across the board, girls would have lower level of financial knowledge or financial skills. It's not as simple as that. I would say, it's not a straightforward answer. We see that in Italy, yes, there is perhaps a bigger gender divide than in other countries that that participated in this exercise. But again, what we see is that, for example, it's not only a question of financial knowledge, but a question of confidence of girls in dealing with money. And I think this is one element that we should bring to the table. It's not only the knowledge that matters, because the gap is not so huge in terms of knowledge. The gap is bigger in terms of access to finance for girls, which is lower than for boys. Confidence is lower as well. And I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Flore-Anne. Again, I have used the word visionary, but this is an understatement when I talk about the PISA data, because of course it is by looking at the data that we can understand how to do policies. And I have to tell you that at the Italian Financial Education Committee, we have looked a lot at the data from the OECD. PISA has been one of the driving factors about some of the work that we have been doing. So thank you for summarizing it so well. And I'm now going to turn to the two co-chair of the G20 Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion. Thanks both of you for finding time. I know the conference just ended to be also here with us. And Anna, let me start with you. I know that Russia also participated in the PISA project. So what did we learn about financial literacy in Russia specifically?
Buonasera, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for inviting to participate in this webinar. You're absolutely right. Russia participated all 3 times in PISA exercise, and we actually supported greatly this work because for us it's very important to learn the level of financial literacy of students to develop first and now implement our national strategies. So what we've learned for these 3 exercises, and in particular this last one, 2018, our level of financial literacy of 15 years old school students is a bit higher than average, and it improved a little bit from 2012. We had 486, and now we had 495. But of course, what is most important is what is behind these numbers, behind these figures. So we see that we are quite good. We are not bad. I may say quite good in reaching this minimal standard of financial literacy. So more students in Russia reach this foundational minimum level than in average in the OECD or all countries participated. But when we look at the higher level of financial literacy, like we have this 5th level, we have less students. So why such a result? I think it's also because of our system of education. It maybe more try to give such middle results, let's say work with middle results, and probably do not work much with high levels of financial education and some other types of education. So it was interesting for us to look how the system of education also influence on those results. Why I say about the system of education? Because exactly as Flore-Anne mentioned about family and influence of parents, but parents often do not have a good background and level themselves. What we see from results that it's important when parents when parents talk about money with their children, and it influence on the level of financial literacy. At least in Russia we see it very well, but of course it's not enough. We see a small difference between boys and girls. Unfortunately, already girls have a bit worse results, though it's not big. But what is important, that I think, Anna, it also correlates a lot with your researchers, that what you do, that the level of confidence of boys, at least in Russia, is higher than girls. So I think that here's also room for improvement. So of course we use these results for developing our materials, changing our educational programs, etc. But I think I will tell a bit more about that later.
Thank you very much, Anna, to tell us that was a very good use of the data and also some of the important findings. And I'm going to turn to Magda now, and I mentioned her role as the co-chair of the G20 conference, but I'm also going to ask her as a very important member of the Comitato per la programmazione e il coordinamento delle attività di educazione finanziaria. So Magda, can you tell us what we learned from the PISA data in Italy? And I'm glad that Flore-Anne already mentioned some of the statistics in a sense about the data in Italy, but you and your team have worked so much on that data. So tell us a little bit more about the findings and the importance of those findings as well.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me here today. Grazie davvero. It's Financial Literacy Month, so we're really pleased to talk about this today. Italian students, well, unfortunately, differently from Russia, we are below the OECD average. We have improved a little bit since the first edition of PISA, but not that much. Basically, 1 out of 5 of Italian students are actually below the basic level that allows them to make aware financial choices. The big thing that comes out from PISA are, I would say, 2. One was already mentioned by Flore-Anne, gender differences. In Italy, we do observe gender differences among 15 years old. They are quite large, they are statistically significant. Reasons are probably many, as have already been mentioned. Cultural reasons are certainly there. The way some topics are taught, like the way math is taught, probably matters as well. Confidence is another issue, of course. The other huge difference is regional. We do observe in Italy quite large differences across the country. So the North actually reaches levels that are comparable to the best countries, or above the OECD average, whereas the Center and the South are actually below that. That already says something about how financial issues are dealt with in the different parts of the countries. We find it, from PISA, we see that students meet financial issues rarely in schools. They speak very rarely within the family. They are often not interested in financial issues. So that's a problem, because our analysis actually show that financial literacy for youth are significantly linked, first, of course, to math competencies, but less than in other countries. This is a common result, of course. Financial literacy is strongly linked to math competencies, but in Italy much less. So there is something else, or maybe there is something related to the way math is taught in Italy, possibly in a more somehow theoretical way, less connected to the implementation and the more practical usage of math tools. And we do see that when you speak about financial issues within your family, you do better. But this increases inequalities, because you tend to speak only in some families, and boys speak more frequently than girls within families. So as a whole, we do observe that there is actually a lot to do, and that cultural issues are still very relevant.
Thank you very much, Magda. And as you can see, there is work to do. So I'm going to now come back to Flore-Anne and say, given these findings, what can we do to improve financial literacy among the young, given also these disparities? And can you also tell us about the experience of some of the countries that you have worked with? You have indeed worked with a lot of countries, the OECD and the International Network on Financial Education is very extensive, has done really a lot of work. So share with us some of those experiences.
Thank you, Anna. Well, very frankly, because of the disparity that were just described by Magda and Anna and by yourself, and because of the correlation between financial literacy and the socioeconomic backgrounds of students, it is quite clear that school has an important role to play in order to bring more equity, I would say, to the table, or to this financial literacy issue. We do believe very strongly at the OECD, and I'd just like to open a parenthesis here. In 2008, we actually launched the International Network for Financial Education. At that point in time, we had 3 priorities. The first one was data. Here you go, the PISA data. The second one was evaluating what works. And the third one was financial education in schools. So it is one of the key priorities, I would say, of the financial literacy community, to try and make sure that financial skills can be disseminated as early as possible in life and at school. I will give a few reasons for that. I already gave the main reason, is the disparity that we see across countries, within countries, and we do hope that school can play a role in bringing more equity in that. Second, schools, very frankly, are the perfect, I would say, context to learn. And I would say the time is also right because children are there to learn. Once you're an adult, you have little time for, you know, learning new things, and especially the case when you are busy with work or even if you're a micro entrepreneur. So in a sense, when you're young, this is, you know, your role, your job to learn. And schools are typically there as a context to provide you with this knowledge. So that's really, you know, this important two roles of schools in a sense. The third thing that I wanted to mention is that it is very important to think in terms of bringing that early to young people. And here, again, sometimes, you know, some policymakers are a bit afraid, okay, are we going to talk about money to young kids? No, it's not about money. Actually, our proficiency level, the first one is really about distinguishing between needs and wants. And you can start this very, very early. And here's my point here is that not only young people need those skills, but they are also a very good disseminator of financial literacy habits. So we also think that this disparity that we observe in the young population, but also in the adult population, can be in a sense a bit breached by the fact that young people, if they start learning financial literacy skills in school, they will bring this conversation back to home and start a conversation with their parents. And in this way, you know, they will disseminate this kind of financial literacy habits a bit more widely. Then the second part of your question was to ask me what our country is doing. And obviously, I mentioned that this network was created back in 2008. So we've been conducting, you know, surveys after surveys to understand what countries were doing in terms of financial literacy in schools. And a number of countries have been successful in actually introducing financial literacy in the curriculum, in primary, secondary, sometimes high school. And we see that the countries that are performing quite well in PISA 2018 have introduced some form of financial literacy in the school. It is the case in Estonia, in Finland, in Canada, for example, in Portugal. Portugal has made financial literacy mandatory in the schools. So we see, you know, that there is a correlation between having, you know, financial literacy in school and results in PISA. So just to say that the message is a positive one. It works when it's well done.
Thank you so much, Flore-Anne. And I'm going to turn now to Anna and to Russia, because actually Russia has been doing also relatively well. So Anna, tell us more, what has Russia done to improve financial literacy among the young?
Yes, I think that when we started in 2011 our program in Russia, we aimed on young people as one of our key audience. So from the scratch, we decided that we will work a lot with schools and with young people. We developed financial literacy competences. Then we started to develop educational programs, educational textbooks, and we tested them, we piloted. So we didn't have yet national scale. We piloted in few regions. You know, Russia is very diverse and big geographically, so we tried to test it. And what we also learned from this PISA survey, that the regions where they started earlier this work, regions which worked with Ministry of Finance closely and developed these regional programs and used our educational materials, textbooks, they are much better in the PISA results. So it exactly shows the impact of financial education in schools. But besides of the piloting some educational programs, textbooks, we, I think, created the whole how to say, circle of or menu set of different kind of financial instruments, which can be also not only educating but some kind of edutainment for young people, including cartoons. You know, we cooperated with a famous cartoon production and made for youngers, for 5, 6, 7 years old, and millions of views of those cartoons in the internet and on TV. Then we developed different type of quests, games, online games, offline games, many Olympiads, championships. So, you know, because it's very important for us that young people also like financial literacy, that they are interested in financial literacy. And of course we tried, because Russian education, Magda mentioned about math in Italy, Russian education tends to be more also quite theoretical. So we wanted that financial literacy would be practically oriented, would be interested. And you know what kids say in school, why other subjects are not so interesting as financial literacy? Of course, we understand that there are differences, but that's what we try to do. And of course, we started to develop all this range of products, you know, through a fund of good ideas. We understood that we couldn't develop all ourselves. So, but Ministry of Finance developed this fund of good ideas. So many educators just applied for this fund and received also some grants and disseminated their ideas. And of course, teachers. I think we probably will speak a bit later about the role of teachers, but I want just to stress that it is very important that teachers would be also prepared and confident, and family. All our educational programs and textbooks, they include family, include parents. We have special materials for parents, that parents feel also comfortable when their kids come from school and start ask questions about budget or something like that, you know. Some parents, and we tried, you know, we try to find a very comfortable, ethical way, because many families are different economic status, have different economic status. So we try to help to avoid such comparison in schools. So it's big work, but we created some kind of system, educational system, worked on young people.
Thank you very much. As you know, the work of the committee started in 2017, so we are a relatively young committee when compared with the experience of many other countries, but I'm going to turn to Magda now to say a little bit more, you know, what, for example, the committee has done, and of course also what the Bank of Italy before the committee has done to improve financial literacy among the young. Magda.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, we are trying to do a lot, but of course it's never enough. As a Bank of Italy, we started around 2008, 2009 to have this program, which we call Teaching the Teachers. We work with teachers and we help them learn and then distribute that to their pupils. We reach approximately 100,000 students per year, but that's really not enough. We developed new material, interactive, and we actually know, we observe from surveys that when pupils meet financial literacy issues in school, they actually do better in terms of financial education. But as I said, that's not enough. With the Committee on Financial Education, we developed last year guidelines for teachers in schools. They are detailed guidelines on competencies to be reached and methods. So we think that's a very important framework that all schools can use. But as Anna was saying, it's very important to help the teachers, and we know that this is probably not enough. So again, with the committee, we have, and with the help of a group of teachers themselves, we have actually developed much more detailed material, what we call specific and detailed orientation material that helps moving from the guidelines into the specific programs of the different topics, because in Italy it's not compulsory, financial education. So we have provided them with a sort of guide on how to teach financial literacy within math programs, within history programs, within Italian programs, and so on, with examples, with specific materials that they can use. And we will distribute it just in the next week to all schools for them to use. We think this will really help addressing one of the issues that is the difficulties for teachers in dealing with financial literacy issues.
Yeah, and I want to cover this a little bit more because I think, it's so important, particularly now that, we are facing a crisis. We have faced, for example, the financial crisis earlier on. And so this topic have really risen to the attention of so many policymakers. So I want to go back to you, Flore-Anne, to tell us a little bit more about, how can we make financial literacy work well in school? And this is a point I think that you made, which is very, very important. And because we want to cover this, and I want to cover also the obstacle that, many are facing in making financial literacy in school, I'll ask, many of you maybe to list some of those, ways to make financial literacy work in school. I do think that the academic evidence shows that financial education works, but what can we do to even make it better? And so we take away, I think, even we convince even those who are skeptical. And I just talked about financial literacy in school in my social media, and everybody's adding their own favorite topic to teach in school. But I do believe that financial literacy should have a special place in school. Flore-Anne, back to you.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I'd like to say that especially when it comes to schools and the education system, there is certainly no one-size-fits-all model on how this can work well, because you need to rely really on the education system of a country in order to make it work. So in a sense, what I'm saying first is you need to have a very operational, pragmatic approach to make it work. And I think that countries that have done this well have really made sure, especially because quite often financial literacy is promoted first by the financial side of government or by the central bank. And so what is really key, I think, as a first step is to making sure that there is a dialogue between this financial side and the education side, because ultimately you will need to rely on the education system to make it work. And I just want to say before continuing with that, that we, although there's no one size fits all, the INFE that I mentioned earlier developed some guidelines on financial education in schools, which is really a kind of, framework providing good practices on how to make that work. But let me go back to my point. So very important to have a good collaboration, a good dialogue between these two sides, and very important to rely on the education system to make it work. Both Anna and Magda mentioned the training of teachers. Obviously, it will be critical. But before that, you need to decide on how you want to integrate financial literacy in the schools. Do you want it to make it a separate subject? Do you want to integrate it into existing class, mathematics class, civic education, history, and so on? Most countries that have introduced financial literacy, apart, I think, from a few states in the US, have decided to take a cross-curricular approach. So that is to say that financial literacy is introduced in classes that are already existing. So in a sense, the math teacher will be the one delivering financial literacy classes. We believe it's good because it's a very pragmatic approach. The curriculum are crowded everywhere. And if you come to your Ministry of Education saying, well, look, there is financial literacy now, can you, have this like a separate subject? Quite often the reaction is no. So you were mentioning obstacle. This is the number one. Curricula are crowded everywhere, and there are a lot of candidates for new topic. By the way, financial literacy is not the only one. So pragmatic approach is to make it cross-curricular. But here it is very important to take this cross-curricular approach very seriously. And by that I mean, first you need to make sure that it is actually taught, because this is the danger with cross-curricular approach, is that in the end, it is the kind of last topic that will be taught by the math teacher at the very end of the year. So this is not something that you want. So in order to make that work, I would say incentives are critical. Incentives for the teachers, for the students, and I would say indirectly to the parents. And I will be specific about incentives. It is important, if possible, to make financial literacy part of the final examination for students. Because this way, obviously, the student will take it seriously. The parents will think it is a serious topic as well. and the teacher will kind of have an obligation to make it happen. Then obviously you cannot leave the math teacher without any support in terms of pedagogical tools, in terms of training, because as was mentioned by Magda, here we are facing a cultural issue. Money is taboo in many, many countries. And if, you know, parents are not really talking about money to their children, it's likely that the teacher doesn't feel very comfortable talking about money. And by the way, financial literacy is not about money, but quite often this is the first conception. So very important to provide them with the training, but again, with the incentives. And the incentives is perhaps to make the training part of their professional career, professional development, part of their personal development. And I'm sure that perhaps Anna and Magda can say more about the support to teachers in that sense. So that way, you know, teachers are part of the story and part of the element of progress. A number of countries have also tried to have teachers that are champion of financial literacy. So in a sense, you don't need to convince, you know, all the teachers that it is important. You just need to convince a few that will be then, you know, the promoter of financial literacy with their colleagues. And I think it's much more powerful than, you know, trying to do it all. So it was just, you know, a few things that, you know, that are important. The last thing I want to mention is you don't want to do too much financial literacy. You don't want to do too little. So again, if introducing financial literacy means a few hours of financial literacy here and there, the impact is likely not to be too big. At the same time, you don't want the whole curriculum to be about that. So try to find the right balance. It looks like when you reach 20 hours of classes, it's already, you know, a sufficient base for students to make progress. And my last point is to make it pragmatic and practical. And Anna said that, you know, students were saying, oh, financial literacy is the most interesting class, perhaps because it was very practical. And so the learning by doing element here is really critical to make it work and enjoyable, I would say, to students. And I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. And I love that you have been able to speak about how to make it effective and also speak about the obstacles that countries have faced. So thank you for connecting this. This is an extremely rich evidence that we will definitely use. And Anna, you know, we are all looking at Russia because, you know, you have been able to make financial literacy mandatory. I know that, you know, this is, you have worked many years. So give us a little bit your insight about, you know, again, continuing what you have said, how to make it work and how to take down the obstacle, which I'm sure you have also faced in trying to implement it in the schools.
Exactly. This year, as you mentioned, Anna, we managed to introduce financial elements of financial literacy into new school standards. So they will be effective from the next studying year. But of course, it took us a few years to do that. And I think first ingredient of success is a system. Flore-Anne also mentioned that it should be done all components together. So that preparation of materials, even starting from united goals, you need to talk to stakeholders that you all understand financial literacy in the similar way, and that we put the same goals to the educational system and to other ways to improve financial literacy. Then, of course, teachers. We started to teach teachers a few years ago, and we now have about 60,000 teachers who already finished this education and already have experience. And what is important, when we teach teachers, we teach not only methods, but financial literacy for them. So teachers after these courses who learned a few years ago already, one woman from Volgograd region told me that because, you know, teachers not the most expensive, let's say, not the best paid profession in the world, but that this teacher, she was able to save money, to have more holidays, and to invest even. So she improved her own well-being, and this is the best, you know, incentive for teachers. Of course, they also have different type of qualification and portfolio, so it also helps when we help them to develop professionally. But I think that also very important is leadership. That Ministry of Finance in our case was starting from 2011, you know, worked and had this idea, and then collaboration when Central Bank joined our efforts, and then together with Ministry of Education. So it's very important that you have leaders who push it, who you know, promote this agenda. And Flore-Anne said also very rightly that it should be really system and thought. So it's not one lesson per year or even, I don't know, per month, because our results of PISA shows that in those regions where we had it systematic, it's better. So we try to do it in systematic way. We tested different approaches. Now we have financial literacy as elective course, standalone, and mandatory in a few subjects. Even in final school exams, we have financial literacy in math and other subjects that students should do it. Of course, we had obstacles. One important, how to convince the Ministry of Education, because exactly the curriculum was overcrowded. So we had to negotiate. We tried to include this financial literacy in functional literacy, in trying to show that these competences are necessary for the modern life, and we succeeded in that. And actually, the last my point probably that, you know, we made it popular in Russia. Financial literacy is popular. We have, it's a little bit even like fashion. There are, of course, good and bad things of that many people want to say that they also make financial literacy. So we try to be very careful that we have certification, etc. But still, these people start to understand why financial literacy is needed for their own life and for their children. So I think there is no final recipe, but efforts, coordination, leadership, and right approach, I think it helps. And I wish Italian colleagues to also to introduce financial literacy as mandatory. I hope it will happen.
Thank you so much, Anna. This is a wonderful wish, and I have to say the committee shares this wish with you. So I'm going to turn to Magda to also tell us more about, you know, indeed how to make it effective. We have heard wonderful comments, and also, you know, what are some of the obstacles that can be in the way?
Well, first I must say I'm really envious about Russia, where it's fashionable, financial literacy is fashionable. We're trying to do it as well. We have opened the Financial Literacy Month with an event, with commissions, with actors, and we will have a campaign, a national campaign, bringing financial literacy into the houses. So we hope we'll do the same. But for schools, I think the recipes that we are trying to put forward are well-designed materials, of course, very interactive, very experience-based, so that they are taken by students, but also, as the other was saying, by teachers, that they can make it their experience somehow. And then, as Flore-Anne was saying, incentives. We, for now, have games, competitions. We have the Economic and Financial Education Olympics in schools. So students race for results. We have a competition called Inventing a Banknote, so that students design banknotes and think about financial literacy. We do hope we will be able to put some elements of financial literacy in final exams. We are interacting with the institution that deals with this. We have made, we have worked with editors to put financial literacy questions into math books, and that hopefully helps as well. But of course, we have to overcome obstacles. And I would say the two main obstacles are this issue that Flore-Anne cited, cultural. Talking about money in schools should not be perceived as unethical. So we have to make sure that, especially for small kids, we give an ethical message, like, you know, paying taxes is good, dealing with these issues is really important for your life, for all who are around you. And the second is, as Ada said, teachers, their competencies. Until we have not formed educated teachers, they feel not confident to teach issues that they are not really too confident about. So we have to work on this. As I said, we have these booklets that are two-sided, booklets for kids and booklets for teachers that help them developing paths, developing games, developing situations to deal with these issues with students, that help them to perceive that it's not difficult, that they can make it. We think these are the main areas we can work on in building the way towards having financial literacy as a compulsory topic within, probably as Flore-Anne was saying, within current topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magda. I always say that financial literacy matters a lot, and it is as important as to be able to read and write in today's society. Certainly the PISA data has indicated that, and we are so happy that we can rely on this incredible work of the OECD to be able to be evidence-based, and we are so happy that we can rely on the experience of many other countries that have shown that it can be done, that we can do it, that financial literacy belongs in school and that it is possible to do it. So we will use your insights for the work of the Italian Financial Education Committee. The Financial Literacy Month is also done for that, to be able to raise awareness, start a dialogue, but also be able to implement changes so that young people are able to build a future, which is also the topic of Financial Literacy Month this year. So I want to thank you again for your insight, for being here with us today, and buon mese dell'educazione finanziaria a tutti. A presto.